welcome back to the Behavior Loop. My name's Lex. I'm going to be keeping you in the loop of everything RBT into BCBA. We're going to be talking about the RBT Task List breakdown. So last that we talked over the section A of measurements. Today, we're going to be going over B and C. Now, B is a very short segment, which is why I'm going to go on and do C as well. And then we're going to be going over D, E, and F next Sunday. So be ready for that video when it's put up. And like, subscribe, do your thing. So without further ado, let's go on and get into the first slide. So you can see right here, here's the sections we'll be going over. This has all the topics that we're going to be covering and what you'll be learning for this video. So we have B1, which is conduct preference assessment. So that's your free operant, your single choice, your paired choice, your multiple stimulus with replacement, and multiple stimulus without replacement. So what you have for free operant is think of a playground or think of a playroom where you have a bunch of toys that are free for a kid to play with, right? They can pick up anything. So when you're using free operant, you're really just seeing what they're touching, what they're playing with, how long, without really being in their space. You're just seeing in their natural environment what's happening. And then you have your paired options. So that's where you have two things and you're like, choose one, and then they choose whatever one. And then you have your multiple stimulus with replacement. So let's say we give them this 4 lineup, so the car, the polar bear, the stuffed animal, the spinner, and they choose whatever they choose. So let's say they choose the car, right? They play with it, you ask for it back, and then you put it back in the lineup, mix it all up, and then represent the prompt. So just choose one. So you just continuously do that to see how many times which item is picked, and you basically build a hierarchy. And then with your multiple stimulus without replacement, it is where you have your 4 options, so your car, your polar bear, your stuffed animal, your spinner, and then they choose car, and then you only have 3 options, and then you only have 2, and then you eventually end up with just 1 option. And then we have the assist with individualized assessments and procedures. So your types of assessments are curriculum-based, developmental, and social skills. So your curriculum-based is assessments of taught skills, so they can focus on academics such as math, writing, or reading. And then the developmental focuses on developmental milestones or focuses on age and grade level skills. And then your social skills focuses on age and grade level social skills. So can they play with a friend nicely? Can they share with a friend? Can they create social relationships with other children? Things like that. And then you have your functional behavior assessment. So that's indirect and direct assessments. So with indirect assessments, you gather information about a learner's behavior without directly observing them in that moment. So anything that has to do with you not being there, so you can't really observe them yourself. So you kind of lean on all sorts of questionnaires. So you have your BASC, your Vineland, interviews with the parents, therapists, and other caregivers, questionnaires and rating scales, and then your ABC charts that are completed by the caregivers or teachers. And then you have your direct assessment, which is the process that the client has observed for the natural environment and recorded data. So this is something that you as RBT or BCBA get to watch physically. So you're taking ABC event recording, antecedent manipulations, and doing functional analysis. So why is this behavior happening? What is the function of it? And then we get into our skill acquisition. This is a bit long and does have some repetitive content that if you watch the initial assessment competency video I made, you're going to see a little bit of stuff that's repeated, but just bear with me, we'll get through this together. So when a skill acquisition plan is created, it includes a clear operational definition of the target behavior. So why that matters is that it ensures that everyone that is teaching the skill understands exactly what the behavior looks like. Then we have our baseline measurement. So baseline data is collected before intervention to determine if the learner's current level of performance. So to provide a reference point to measure progress and determine whether an intervention is effective. And then we have 3, which is clear and measurable goals, which goals should be a specific, observable, and measurable so progress can be tracked. So measuring goals makes it easy for the entire treatment team to know when a goal has been achieved. And then we have 4, which is detailed description of procedures. So each goal includes step-by-step teaching procedures. So it allows any qualified staff, RBT, BCA, BA, BCBA, to implement a plan with fidelity. And then we have 5, which is our reactive strategies, which plans include guidance for responding to maladaptive behavior and teaching replacement skills. So it ensures consistency and prevents reinforcement of unwanted behaviors. And then we have data collection and graphing, which is data should be collected as outlined in the plan. So data-driven decisions making for all ABA programs, which we should leave up to the BCBA. And then plan review, which is BCBA's review and update skill acquisition plans regularly, at least during the minimum supervision requirements as set by the BACB, which is your 5%. So it keeps the plan relevant and effective. And then our last one, which is maintenance and termination. So when goals are mastered and maintenance procedures are put in place to ensure skills retained, termination is considered when all goals are met and the client's function is age appropriate. So maintaining long-term independence and prevent skill regression. And then you have your session preparation. So you prepare for the session as required by the skill acquisition plan. So you're reading the plan, reviewing it, client communication, implement. So you're basically reading at what the session is, how to implement it, and how to make sure that if something needs corrected, how to correct it properly, and what exactly that would look like. So think of your antecedents and your consequences, because we already know what the behavior is. And then we have contingency of reinforcement. So we're going to go over the unconditioned versus conditioned reinforcement, conditioned and unconditional punishment, and continuous and versus intermittent reinforcement. So we have our unconditioned versus conditioned reinforcement. So your unconditioned reinforcement is reinforcement that is unlearned and naturally reinforcing because it is essential for survival. So that is your basic needs. That is your food, water, sleep, shelter, things like that, things you need to survive. These are automatic reinforcers that are effective without prior learning. That's not something that you learned or are taught. It's just things that you need and you automatically know that you're going to get them, hopefully. And then we have our conditioned reinforcement. This is reinforcement that has been learned through association, so pairing with an unconditioned or previously conditioned reinforcer. A debit card can become a reinforcer after it's paired with the ability to buy desired items. And then we have our conditioned versus unconditioned punishment. So unconditioned punishment is naturally punishing. It decreases a behavior without prior learning. So touching a hot stove, that pain doesn't feel too good. Loud noises, we don't like that. And extreme cold. These stimuli decrease behavior immediately without conditioning. And then we have our conditioned punishment. So this punishment that has been learned by pairing with an unconditioned or conditioned punisher. So a ringtone paired with a repeated negative call from your boss about how you're always late and that you're going to get fired if you don't figure it out, which is something that you want to try to avoid. So it shows how natural stimuli can take on punishing properties through learning. Our continuous reinforcement, CRF, is reinforcement that is delivered for every occurrence of the target behavior. Every time you're teaching a new skill, if you're teaching a kid to clap, every time they clap, you're going, oh my gosh, good job, that was so good, here's a toy, here's this. You're reinforcing that continuously. And then you have your intermediate reinforcement. That's reinforcement that is delivered only sometimes, so only some occurrences of the behavior. Then we have schedule of reinforcement and punishment. So we have our fixed versus variable, whether a schedule is predicted, fixed, or unpredicted, variable, and ratio versus interval, whether the schedule is based on the number of responses, your ratio, or the passage of time, which is your interval. So your fixed ratio, FR, is reinforcement after a set number of responses. Your variable ratio, so your VR, is reinforcement after a varying number of responses averaging a set amount. Your fixed interval is FI, reinforcement after the first correct response following a set amount of time, and then variable interval, which is reinforcement after the first correct response following a variable amount of time and averaging a set time. And then we have our discrete trial training. So DTT, it is a structured teaching method where it has a very clear beginning, middle, and end. So a kid knows that when they're beginning an instruction and they're ending it, which is a reinforcement. So your instruction could be clap your hands, and the response should hopefully be them clapping their hands, and then you either provide a lot of reinforcement, verbal reinforcement, like, oh my gosh, good job, that was so good, so high praise, or you could just error correct and then show them the proper one. Then we have naturalistic teaching. So naturalistic teaching uses the child's natural environment and interest to teach skills during the play or daily routine. So it's very child-led. It's teaching opportunities that arise naturally, so we're not forcing it or making it happen, it's just happening. And reinforcing is directly related to the behavior. So let's say that we're in a playroom and we're playing catch with a bunch of different color balls, right? And one of the things we're teaching the kid is their colors. So we're throwing the ball, having a good time, and you're like, oh my gosh, you just threw this ball. What color is it? It's a blue ball. Good job. And you keep playing. Because it's already a part of their environment, it's not like you're forcing them to do it. We're already playing catch. So it's in their natural environment, naturalistic teaching procedures. Hopefully that makes sense. So then we get into task analysis. So task analysis is basically chaining. So breaking a task into smaller steps and teaching each step one at a time until the whole task is learned. So your forward chaining is where you have the first step and you're like, oh my goodness, what do we do? Do we turn the water on? What do we do? And it's a teaching opportunity. And then after you do that, you do everything for them. And we're basically waiting for them to master the very first step before we teach any other step. Then backward chaining is where we do everything for them through opening water to grabbing paper towel and then letting them figure out what the last step is and showing them, giving them a teaching opportunity of like, what do we do next? So we dry hands until they master that, and then we go a step back into actually grabbing the paper towel, and we only teach them that. So we're doing everything for them for the first step till that step, and then seeing if they can do it until mastery, and then working backwards on what we're teaching, not doing the task backwards, but just teaching the last steps and doing everything for them in the beginning. And then total task chaining is where we go in and we use every opportunity as a learning opportunity. So instead of doing it all for them, we're just like, okay, what do? We turn the water on, good job. Now what? We get our hands wet, good job. And so forth. We do that through the whole steps. So hopefully that makes sense. And then we had discrimination training. So teaching a client to tell the difference between two or more stimuli. So you present two items and reinforce the correct response. And then we have discrimination training, which is teaching a client to tell the difference between two or more stimuli. So, for example, I have two items. So I have a white clip and a green clip. And I'm like, okay, pick the green clip. And then they pick the green. Good job, you picked the green clip. They're able to discriminate that this is green and this is white, right? And then, of course, if they didn't pick the green, they picked the white, it would just be error correcting until they got the right answer. So that is discrimination training, is being able to discriminate between two different stimuli. Hopefully that makes sense. And then we have stimulus controlled transfer. So when a behavior is evoked by an SD, it comes under the control of a different SD. So clients respond without needing help. So initially therapists say clap hands and then physically guide the hands, which is prompting them. And then over time, the therapist is gonna fade out the physical prompt so that when the therapist says, all right, clap hands, the client just claps hands without having to have that physical prompt. And then we have prompt and prompt fading. So a prompt is help given to evoke or encourage a correct response. So the types of prompts are your full physical, partial physical, full verbal, partial verbal, gestural, modal, and then independency. So a therapist says, touch your head and gently guides the child's hand to their head. So full physical prompt. So how we do prompt fading? We have most to least prompting, which begins with the most intrusive prompt, which is a full physical, needed to ensure the correct response, and then gradually fade to less intrusive prompts until the learner can respond independently. They often use it for errorless learning, which reduces the likelihood of errors during initial teaching and increases correct response. So teaching wave, we start with a full physical prompt where we're waving for them, and then we fade to partial, which is not moving but holding their hand, so they do this, and then model, so we're doing this, and then gesture, and then independency. And then we have least to most prompting, which we present the task and allow the learner a fixed time interval to respond independently. So if no correct response occurs, it provides the least intrusive prompt, so the verbal or model or gestural, things like that, and then increase the prompt's intensity until the correct response is given. So it allows the learners the opportunity to respond without prompt dependence and is good for skills that have some familiarity with. So something they already kind of understand. And then teaching clap hands. So we present the SD, so clap hands, wait 5 seconds. If no response, and then we're gonna gesture clap hands, like have some like, look, clap your hands, and then go into model, then physical if needed. And then we have our graduated guidance, which is a physical prompting method where the therapist provides as much physical guidance as needed and immediately fades the intensity of the prompt as the learner begins to respond. So it allows for quick fading of physical contact and reduces prompting dependency. So teaching clap hands, start with hands over hands and fade to wrist, then to forearms, then to elbows, then to no physical contact. And then there's time delay, which is gradually increasing the time between presenting the SD and delivering a prompt. So it encourages the independent responding while still providing support if needed. So teaching point to apple, initial the SD, which is point to apple with the immediate prompt, and then later introduce a 1 second delay before prompting a 3 second, a 5 second until the learner responds independently. So then we get into generalization and maintenance. So there are two types of generalization. We have stimulus generalization. So think of it this way. The stimulus changes, but the response stays the same. So let's say that you're teaching a child dog when they see their family's dog, and later they see their neighbor's dog, completely different dog, and still say dog. It's the same response, it's just a different stimulus. And then we have response generalization. Now here, the stimulus is the same, but the response changes. So you're greeting your mom, and sometimes you say hey, sometimes you say hello, sometimes you say hey mom. But when you greet your friends, you might say, hey, what's up? What's going on? Oh, how are you? It's the same situation, which is greeting someone, but your response has variety. It's different. It's not the same each time. You're not a robot. And then we have our maintenance. So plan for it from the start. Make sure goals can work in natural environments. Give reinforcement every so often, so not every single time, and then teach parents, teachers, and other caregivers how to keep that skill alive outside of sessions when you're not there to be able to keep them going. And then we get into shaping. Shaping involves reinforcing successive approximations of a desired behavior. So you start with small steps and only reinforce behaviors that get closer to the goal. So we could take the ball, for example. Let's say that a kid can't really say ball, but they have really close to ba. So we teach them to say ba for ball, and then they get reinforced every time they say ba. And then we're no longer going to reinforce that. Now we're looking for ba. So now we reinforce ba, but not ba. And then, so fourth, we go for ball and no longer reinforce ball and ba after they mastered it. And now we're only accepting ball. That is shaping that word for them to be able to say it. So successive approximations. Token economy. So clients earn tokens for desired behaviors, which can be exchanged for a reward. Now remember, tokens have zero value. Tokens are paired with backup reinforcers, so they don't really care about the little tokens you give them. What they care about is what those tokens represent, which is I get time to play on my iPad. I get time to play with my favorite toy. I get time to color or paint my nails, things like that. So clients get tokens for each correct answer, and after 5 tokens, or whatever set amount of tokens that you set, they get to trade that for playtime or whatever they want. So that would be the end of our section B through C. I hope this was super educational, that you learned a lot. I will be working on D, E, and F, and they're going to be all together so we can just have the task breakdown done. If you have any questions whatsoever, please leave them in the comments. Any suggestions, anything you want to see next, other than what I'm working on already, which is D, E, and F, then I would love to hear it. Please let me know if this was very helpful for you guys, what you'd like to see more, and don't forget to like and subscribe and share with your friends, and I hope you have an amazing day.